The morning sun was just beginning to rise over Atlanta International Airport as Dr. Maya Wilson rushed through the terminal, her wheeled suitcase clicking rhythmically against the polished floor. At 42, she carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from years of working as one of the few black female neurosurgeons in the country. Today's flight to Los Angeles felt particularly important. Maya was scheduled to deliver a keynote speech at a prestigious medical conference, representing not only her hospital but also serving as an inspiration for minority medical students. She had spent weeks preparing her presentation on breakthrough treatments in pediatric neurosurgery. After breezing through security with her TSA pre-check, Maya stopped at a coffee shop, treating herself to a large cappuccino and a blueberry muffin. She checked her boarding pass again, seat 3F, first class. She had used her hard-earned miles for this upgrade, wanting to arrive fresh and well-rested for her presentation. The gate area was already crowded when she arrived. Maya noticed how some passengers did double takes when they saw her sitting in the priority boarding section. She was used to these looks by now, the subtle surprise that often crossed people's faces when they realized she wasn't waiting in the regular economy line. When the gate agent called for first-class boarding, Maya gathered her belongings and walked confidently toward the jet bridge. She smiled warmly at the flight attendant who greeted her at the aircraft door, a young woman named Sarah who returned her smile with genuine warmth. "Welcome aboard. 3A is on your left," Sarah said, checking Maya's boarding pass. Maya made her way down the aisle, noting how the rich leather seats and extra legroom in first class always made her feel like she was entering a different world. However, as she approached row 3, she stopped abruptly. Her assigned seat was already occupied. A white man in his 60s, wearing an expensive-looking suit, sat comfortably in 3A, his laptop already open on the tray table. He was typing away, seemingly oblivious to Maya's presence. She double-checked her boarding pass, though she already knew she was right. "Excuse me, sir," Maya said politely, keeping her voice steady and professional. "I believe you're in my seat. I'm assigned to 3A. The man barely glanced up from his laptop screen. "There must be some mistake," he said dismissively. "I always sit in first class. I'm a Platinum Elite member." Maya took a deep breath, maintaining her composure. She'd faced similar situations before in her professional life, and experience had taught her to handle them with grace. "I understand, sir, but I have a confirmed booking for this seat. Would you mind checking your boarding pass?" The man finally looked up, his eyes narrowing as he properly saw Maya for the first time. A flash of something, surprise, perhaps disdain, crossed his face. "Listen," he said, his voice taking on a condescending tone. "I've upgraded myself because I'm a frequent flyer. I'm sure you can understand that someone like me needs this seat more than—" He paused, leaving the rest of his sentence hanging in the air. Other passengers were beginning to board now, creating a slight backup in the aisle. Maya could feel their eyes on her, some curious, others uncomfortable. A few had already pulled out their phones, sensing the tension in the air. Maya stood her ground, her hand firmly gripping her boarding pass. Years of handling difficult situations in the operating room had taught her to remain calm under pressure. "Sir, I have a valid ticket for this seat, which I purchased with my own airline miles. I'd be happy to show you my boarding pass." The man's face reddened slightly, but he made no move to get up. Instead, he turned back to his laptop, clearly attempting to ignore her. "You must be mistaken. Why don't you check with the gate agent? I'm sure they can find you another seat." Maya felt a familiar weight in her chest, the same feeling she'd experienced countless times throughout her career when someone assumed she didn't belong. Today felt different. She wasn't going to let this pass quietly, not anymore. As she stood there, Sarah, the flight attendant who had greeted her, noticed the commotion and began making her way down the aisle. The next few moments would prove to be far more significant than anyone could have anticipated, and the events about to unfold would soon capture the attention of millions across the country. Sarah, the flight attendant, approached the situation with the practiced calm of someone who had handled many passenger disputes. However, even she could sense this was different from the usual seating mix-ups. "Is there a problem here?" Sarah asked, glancing between Maya and the man who refused to move. Maya handed her boarding pass to Sarah. "Yes, this gentleman is sitting in my assigned seat, 3A. When I pointed this out, he said he upgraded himself because he's a frequent flyer." Sarah examined Maya's boarding pass carefully, then turned to the man. "Sir, could I please see your boarding pass?" The man rustled through his briefcase with obvious irritation, eventually producing a crumpled boarding pass. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she read it. "Sir, your assigned seat is 23C, in economy class. I'm afraid you'll need to move to your proper seat." "This is ridiculous," the man declared loudly, drawing even more attention from other passengers. "Do you know who I am? I've been flying this airline for 20 years. I always sit in first class." By now, several passengers had their phones out, recording the interaction. In seat 3B, a young Asian woman in business attire looked uncomfortable but kept her phone steady, capturing every word. "Sir," Sarah said firmly, "your status with the airline doesn't give you the right to take another passenger's assigned seat. Dr. Wilson has a valid first-class ticket for this seat." The man's head snapped up at the mention of Dr. Wilson. He looked at Maya again, this time with obvious disbelief. "Doctor?" he scoffed. "Of what?" "Hair braiding." A collective gasp went through the first-class cabin. Maya felt her hands trembling slightly, but her voice remained steady. "I'm a neurosurgeon, sir. Not that my profession should matter when it comes to claiming the seat I rightfully paid for." From across the aisle, an elderly white gentleman in seat 3C spoke up. "I've been quiet long enough. Young man, your behavior is absolutely shameful. This kind of blatant racism has no place here or anywhere else." The man in Maya's seat turned red. "Racism? This has nothing to do with race. I'm a paying customer who is sitting in someone else's assigned seat," interrupted another passenger, a middle-aged woman in 2A. "We all saw you try to intimidate this lady and make assumptions about her profession. It's disgusting." Sarah, maintaining her professional demeanor, addressed the man again. "Sir, I need you to gather your belongings and move to your assigned seat immediately. If you refuse, I'll have to contact the captain, and you may be removed from the flight." The man looked around, seemingly surprised to find no supporters among his fellow passengers. More phones were recording now, and the back of the line in the aisle had grown longer. Some economy passengers were standing on tiptoes to see what was causing the delay. "This is outrageous," he muttered, finally beginning to pack up his laptop. "I've never been treated like this. I'll be filing a complaint with corporate." "Please do," Sarah replied calmly. "I'm sure they'd be very interested in reviewing the footage of this incident." As the man gathered his things, he continued to mutter under his breath, making comments about reverse discrimination and the world gone mad. Each statement was caught clearly on the dozens of phones recording the scene. Finally, he stood up, shooting Maya a venomous look. As he pushed past her in the aisle, he growled, "You people are always causing problems." The elderly gentleman in 3C spoke up again. "What was that? Would you care to repeat that statement for all our cameras?" The man hurried down the aisle without responding, his face now purple with rage and embarrassment. Sarah turned to Maya with genuine concern. "Dr. Wilson, I am so sorry you had to experience this. Please let me know if you need anything during the flight. We're honored to have you aboard." Maya sank into her seat, her heart still racing but her head held high. The young woman in 3B leaned over. "I got everything on video," she whispered. "Would you like me to send it to you? People need to see this." As Maya settled in, several other first-class passengers came by to offer words of support and share their own stories of facing discrimination. What had started as an ugly confrontation was transforming into something unexpected. A moment of unity among strangers who refused to stay silent in the face of injustice. After the initial confrontation, Sarah hurried to the front of the plane to speak with the lead flight attendant, Jennifer, and the captain. She quickly explained what had happened, emphasizing the discriminatory comments and the passengers' reactions. "The situation is under control now," Sarah explained, "but that man's behavior was completely unacceptable. Several passengers recorded everything." Jennifer nodded gravely. "I'll go speak with him in economy. We need to make sure there won't be any further incidents during the flight." She turned to the captain's cabin and pressed the intercom button. "Captain, we have a situation you should be aware of." Meanwhile, Maya sat in her rightful seat, trying to focus on reviewing her presentation notes, but her hands were still shaking slightly. The young woman next to her in 3B introduced herself as Grace Chen, a software engineer from Silicon Valley. I've already posted the video to my social media, Grace said quietly. Hope you don't mind. People need to see this kind of thing still happens, even in 2025. Maya managed a small smile. Thank you. Sometimes having proof makes all the difference. In economy class, Jennifer found the man, now slumped in his seat 23C, still muttering angrily to himself. She noticed several economy passengers giving him disapproving looks. Word of what happened had already spread throughout the plane. Sir, Jennifer said firmly, I need to speak with you about your behavior in first class. The man looked up, his face still flushed. I want to file a complaint. This is completely unfair treatment of a loyal customer. Jennifer's expression remained professional but stern. Sir, I need to make something very clear. Your actions and comments were discriminatory and violated our airline's passenger code of conduct. Multiple passengers recorded your behavior. At this point, we could remove you from this flight. The man's eyes widened. You wouldn't dare. We absolutely would, Jennifer continued. However, since we're already running behind schedule, we're giving you one chance. You will remain in your assigned seat for the duration of the flight. You will not attempt to approach first class or Dr. Wilson. If you cause any further disturbance, we will divert this plane and have you removed. Do you understand? The man's face cycled through various shades of red, but he nodded stiffly. Back in first class, Sarah was organizing a special gesture of support. She had quietly spoken with other flight attendants and several passengers who wanted to show their solidarity with Maya. As the plane finally took off, Sarah noticed Maya trying to calm herself by taking deep breaths. She approached with a warm smile. Dr. Wilson, would you like a glass of champagne? It's on the house today. Before Maya could respond, the elderly gentleman in 3C spoke up again. Make that a round for everyone in first class. I'm buying. Let's toast to standing up against ignorance. The atmosphere in first class had transformed. What started as a tense confrontation had evolved into an impromptu community of support. Passengers began sharing their own experiences with discrimination, creating an unexpected bond. A retired teacher in 2B leaned over to share how she'd faced similar treatment in her career. A businessman in 1A talked about how his daughter, also a doctor, often dealt with patients who doubted her abilities because of her gender and race. Sarah and the other flight attendants moved through the cabin with renewed purpose, providing extra attention and care to all passengers, but especially to Maya. They wanted to ensure that the rest of her flight would help erase the memory of its terrible beginning. Jennifer made regular walks through economy class, keeping a careful eye on the man in 23C. He remained silent, staring straight ahead, probably realizing that his actions would have consequences beyond this flight. As the plane cruised at altitude, Maya pulled out her phone and saw that Grace's video was already gaining traction online. Messages of support were pouring in from around the country. The hashtag #FirstClassDoc was trending. Sarah appeared again with a notebook. Dr. Wilson, several passengers have asked if they could write testimonials about what they witnessed. They want to make sure there's a record beyond the videos. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes, but this time they weren't from hurt or anger. The overwhelming support from complete strangers had touched her deeply. What could have been another demoralizing experience of discrimination had instead become a powerful demonstration of humanity at its best. 2 hours into the flight, Maya's story had taken social media by storm. The videos posted by Grace and other passengers have been shared thousands of times, with news organizations already reaching out to the airline for comments. In first class, an unexpected alliance had formed among the passengers. James Thompson, the elderly gentleman in 3C who had first spoken up, turned out to be a retired civil rights attorney. He spent the past hour writing detailed notes about the incident on his laptop. Dr. Wilson, he said, turning to Maya, if you're interested, I'd be happy to write a formal statement. This kind of discrimination shouldn't go unchallenged. Grace, still in 3B, was monitoring the online response. The video has over 1 million views already, she reported. And the airline's social media team has started responding. They're taking this very seriously. A businesswoman named Patricia from 2A joined the conversation. I'm on the board of directors for several companies, she said. The way you handled that situation was remarkable, Dr. Wilson. Would you consider speaking at corporate events about dealing with discrimination in professional settings? Maya felt overwhelmed by the support, but in a positive way. I never expected this flight to turn into such a powerful moment, she admitted. Sarah returned with more champagne for the group. Dr. Wilson, you should know that passengers from economy have been sending notes forward. They want you to know they support you too. She handed Maya a stack of napkins and papers with hastily scribbled messages. Thank you for standing your ground. You inspire us all. My daughter wants to be a doctor. You show it's possible. The atmosphere in first class had transformed into something like a strategy session. James Thompson was advising Maya on how to handle media inquiries that would likely come her way. Grace offered to help manage social media responses. Patricia was making calls to her corporate contacts about speaking engagements. Even the pilots got involved. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. While we generally don't comment on passenger interactions, I want to make it clear that this airline stands firmly against discrimination of any kind. We're proud to have Dr. Wilson aboard today. The cabin erupted in applause, except for the visible discomfort in row 23. A flight attendant from economy came forward to whisper to Sarah. The man keeps demanding to speak to corporate. He's claiming he's being harassed now. Sarah rolled her eyes. Jennifer's handling him. He's lucky we didn't remove him from the flight. Maya used this time to work on her conference presentation, now adding a new slide about confronting bias in professional settings. Her seatmates became an impromptu focus group, offering suggestions and sharing their own experiences. You know, Grace said thoughtfully, this whole incident proves something important. When people stand together against discrimination, it's much harder for the perpetrators to maintain their behavior. James nodded in agreement. In my 50 years of legal practice, I've seen how public exposure often leads to meaningful change. The fact that so many people recorded this incident and immediately stood up against it, that's progress. A young man from row 4 approached Maya's seat. Dr. Wilson, I'm a medical student at UCLA. Would you mind if I asked you some questions about your career? You're kind of becoming my hero right now. Maya spent the next 30 minutes mentoring the young student, turning what had started as an awful experience into an opportunity to inspire the next generation of doctors. Patricia watched this interaction with approval. You see, this is exactly why representation matters. That young man will remember this day for the rest of his career. As they passed the flight's midpoint, Sarah brought lunch service to first class. The passengers had formed such a bond that they arranged their tray tables to face each other, turning the cabin into an impromptu dinner party. The conversation flowed naturally between professional advice, personal stories, and plans for staying in touch after landing. What had started as a confrontation had evolved into a powerful demonstration of allyship and community. Maya looked around at these strangers who had become unexpected champions of justice. I came on this flight prepared to give a medical presentation, she said, raising her glass. Instead, I found a whole team of advocates I never knew I needed. The group toasted to her words, while in economy class, a certain passenger in 23C could only watch in silence as his attempt at discrimination had backfired spectacularly. As the flight entered its final hours, the man in 23C grew increasingly agitated. The dirty looks from fellow economy passengers and the occasional whispers about that racist guy were getting to him. He had never experienced being on this side of public opinion before. Jennifer, the lead flight attendant, noticed his restlessness and kept a watchful eye. She saw him unbuckle his seatbelt several times, appearing to consider getting up, only to sit back down under her stern gaze. Finally, about an hour before landing, he pressed his call button. When Jennifer approached, his demeanor had changed completely from his earlier arrogance. I think I made a terrible mistake, he said quietly, his voice shaking slightly. Is there any way I could apologize to Dr. Wilson? Jennifer studied him carefully. Sir, I'll have to discuss this with Dr. Wilson first. We need to ensure she feels comfortable with any interaction. Meanwhile, in first class, Maya was engaged in a meaningful conversation with her newfound allies when Sarah approached with Jennifer's message about the man's request. He wants to apologize, Sarah explained. But of course, it's entirely your choice whether to accept or even hear him out. The first-class passengers immediately became protective. James Thompson spoke up first. You don't owe him anything, Dr. Wilson. Grace added, the videos have already gone viral. He's probably just trying to save face. Maya considered the situation carefully. As a doctor, she had learned that sometimes the hardest moments could become opportunities for growth. I'll hear him out, she decided, but not alone. Sarah nodded understanding. We can have him come to the galley area. Jennifer and I will be present, and you can have someone accompany you if you'd like. James immediately volunteered to stand with Maya. They moved to the galley area, where Jennifer brought the man forward from economy. The change in his appearance was striking. Gone was the arrogant businessman who had tried to steal a seat. Instead, he looked deflated and ashamed. Dr. Wilson, he began, his voice barely above a whisper, I behaved terribly. My actions were inexcusable. Maya remained silent, waiting. I've been watching the videos spreading online, he continued, seeing myself through other people's eyes. I didn't recognize that person. I've always considered myself a successful businessman, but today I acted like nothing more than a common bully. He paused, struggling with his words. My granddaughter called me during our last stop. Somehow she'd already seen the video. She was crying, asking how her grandpa could be so mean. She's 11, and she gave me a lesson in humanity I should have learned decades ago. Tears formed in his eyes. I know an apology isn't enough, but I want you to know that you taught me something today. Your dignity in the face of my horrible behavior, the way other passengers stood up for what's right. It's shown me how wrong I've been. Maya finally spoke, her voice firm but not unkind. Thank you for apologizing. You're right. It doesn't erase what happened, but recognizing our mistakes is the first step toward change. The man nodded. I've already called my office. I'm going to take some time off, get some counseling. This incident made me realize I have issues I need to address. James, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Actions speak louder than words. What will you do differently after today? I'm starting with my company, the man replied. We need better diversity training. Real training, not just checking boxes. And I'm going to share this story, my story of being wrong and learning from it. Maya considered his words carefully. Use this experience to educate others. That would give some meaning to what happened today. The man nodded again, looking genuinely humbled. As Jennifer led him back to his seat, the other passengers who had witnessed the interaction shared glances of cautious approval. Returning to her seat, Maya found Grace updating her social media posts with a new development. Update. Sometimes growth comes from unexpected places. Justice isn't just about punishment, it's about transformation. The plane began its descent into Los Angeles, carrying passengers who had witnessed not just a confrontation, but possibly the beginning of one person's journey toward change. Whether the man's transformation would last remained to be seen, but for now, at least, an important lesson had been learned at 35,000 feet. By the time the plane touched down at Los Angeles International Airport, the story had exploded across every major social media platform. Grace's original video had surpassed 5 million views, and multiple passengers' recordings were being shared widely across different networks. Major news outlets had already picked up the story. Headlines ranged from first-class discrimination, Black doctor stands her ground, to passengers unite against racism on Flight 2317. The airline's corporate communications team was working overtime to address the situation. As passengers began to deplane, Maya's phone was flooded with notifications. Her hospital's public relations department had called 3 times, and her inbox was filling with interview requests from morning shows and news programs. Dr. Wilson, Grace said, showing Maya her phone, you're trending #1 nationwide. People are calling this a teaching moment about standing up to discrimination. The comments section under the viral videos told their own story. This is how everyone should react when witnessing racism. Those passengers standing up for her restored my faith in humanity. As a Black medical student, this hits close to home. Thank you for standing strong, Dr. Wilson. As Maya gathered her belongings, Sarah approached with a surprise. Dr. Wilson, there are reporters waiting at the gate. The airline's PR team is there too. Would you like to exit through a different way? We can arrange that. James Thompson, still acting as an impromptu advisor, suggested, you might want to make a brief statement. Control the narrative before others do it for you. Patricia, the businesswoman, quickly added, I can have my PR team here in 20 minutes if you'd like professional support. This is too important to handle alone. Maya took a deep breath. considering her options. She hadn't asked for this attention, but perhaps she could use it to make a difference. "I'll speak to them briefly," she decided. "This isn't just about me anymore." As passengers from economy filed past, many stopped to shake her hand or offer words of support. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner, while others shared their own stories of facing discrimination. The man who had caused the incident was one of the last to deplane, escorted by Jennifer to ensure no further issues arose. He kept his head down, but the videos of both his initial behavior and later apology were already being widely shared and debated online. At the gate, a small crowd had gathered. Local news cameras were rolling as Maya emerged from the jet bridge, flanked by her newfound allies from first class. Grace was still documenting everything, her live stream now watched by thousands. The airline's PR representative stepped forward first. "Dr. Wilson, on behalf of our airline, we want to publicly apologize for your experience today. We're announcing new training protocols for all our staff regarding discrimination." Reporters called out questions. "Dr. Wilson, what made you stand your ground? How do you feel about the other passengers' response? What message do you have for others facing similar discrimination?" Maya responded with the same dignity she'd shown throughout the flight. Today showed both the worst and best of human nature. While one person's actions were disappointing, the response from other passengers proved that most people will stand up for what's right when given the chance. As she spoke, more videos from the flight were going viral. The moment when passengers united against discrimination, the impromptu support group that formed in first class, and even the man's eventual apology. All were being shared and discussed across the internet. Social justice organizations were already reaching out, asking Maya to speak at events. Educational institutions wanted her to share her story with their students. The incident was quickly becoming a case study in how to handle discrimination and the power of bystander intervention. Grace's final update before leaving the airport read, "Witnessed history today. One woman's dignity in the face of discrimination sparked a movement. This is how change happens. One moment, one flight, one person standing up for what's right at a time." As Maya finally left the airport, headed to her medical conference where she would now be addressing more than just neurosurgery, she realized that sometimes the most important lessons happen when we least expect them. Her story was no longer just about a stolen seat in first class. It had become a powerful reminder that standing up against injustice, with dignity and support from others, could create ripples of change far beyond one flight. The morning after the flight incident, Maya woke up in her Los Angeles hotel room to find her story had become national news. Before she could even prepare for her medical conference presentation, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed the airline's corporate headquarters. "Dr. Wilson, this is Michael Chen, CEO of the airline. I hope I'm not calling too early." Maya sat up in bed, surprised by the direct contact from the company's highest level. "No, Mr. Chen, I'm already awake." "Dr. Wilson, I watched all the videos from your flight yesterday. I couldn't sleep last night thinking about what you experienced on our aircraft. I'm calling to personally apologize and take concrete action." As Maya listened, Chen outlined immediate changes the airline would implement. They weren't just offering the usual corporate apology, they were announcing real, substantial reforms. "We're implementing a new zero-tolerance policy for discrimination," Chen explained. "Any passenger displaying discriminatory behavior will be immediately removed from the flight and permanently banned from our airline." But Chen wasn't finished. "We're also launching a comprehensive training program for all our staff, from gate agents to pilots. And we'd like your input on this, Dr. Wilson. Your experience and perspective would be invaluable." Meanwhile, at the airline's headquarters, an emergency board meeting was taking place. The viral videos had affected the company's stock price, but more importantly, they had sparked a larger conversation about discrimination in air travel. The man from the flight had been officially placed on the airline's no-fly list. His own company, after seeing the videos, had placed him on administrative leave, pending an investigation into his conduct. By mid-morning, the airline had released an official statement. "We acknowledge the unacceptable incident that occurred on Flight 2317. We are grateful to Dr. Maya Wilson for her grace under pressure and to our crew and passengers who stood against discrimination. Today, we announce the following changes. 1. Implementation of new anti-discrimination protocols. 2. Enhanced staff training programs. 3. Creation of a passenger diversity and inclusion advisory board. 4. $5 million commitment to organizations promoting equality in professional fields. The corporate response didn't stop there. Sarah and Jennifer, the flight attendants who handled the situation professionally, were publicly commended and promoted to training positions, where they would help implement the new protocols. The airline's social media team worked overtime responding to comments and messages. Rather than trying to bury the story, they were actively engaging with it, sharing updates about their policy changes and encouraging discussions about making air travel more inclusive. Later that afternoon, Maya received another call, this time from the airline's marketing department. They wanted to feature her in a new campaign about respect and dignity in air travel. The campaign would highlight not just her story, but also the positive response from other passengers. "Your story resonates with so many people," Dr. Wilson, the marketing director, explained. "It's not just about what happened to you, it's about how people came together to stand up for what's right." The airline's employees were also making their voices heard. Flight attendant unions praised the company's swift response and used the incident to push for better training and support in handling similar situations. At the corporate headquarters, Chen was meeting with his executive team to discuss long-term changes. "This isn't just about public relations," he insisted. "This is about making real, lasting changes in how we serve our passengers and support our employees." The airline's response was being closely watched by other companies in the industry. Competing airlines began reviewing their own policies, recognizing that they needed to be prepared for similar situations. By evening, the airline had announced a partnership with several civil rights organizations to develop better training materials and policies. They were turning a potential PR crisis into an opportunity for genuine reform. Maya, preparing for her medical conference presentation, received one final email from CEO Chen. "Dr. Wilson, your dignity and strength have helped us see where we need to improve. We're not just making changes because of public pressure, we're making them because they're right. Thank you for helping us become better. Your first-class ticket status has been upgraded to lifetime, but more importantly, your experience will help ensure no passenger faces similar discrimination on our airlines again." The corporate response had transcended the usual damage control. Instead, it had become a catalyst for systematic change in how airlines handle discrimination and protect their passengers' dignity. 1 year after the incident on Flight 2317, Maya sat in the same first-class seat, 3A, heading back to Los Angeles. This time, she wasn't just going to deliver a medical presentation. She was the keynote speaker at a national conference on workplace diversity and inclusion. The changes that had stemmed from that fateful flight were far greater than anyone could have imagined. The viral video had become a teaching tool in corporate training sessions, medical schools, and even airline staff orientations across the country. Maya looked around the cabin, noticing the new signs prominently displayed. "All passengers deserve respect. Report any discrimination." The airline had transformed its entire corporate culture, setting a new standard for the industry. Grace Chen, the young woman who had recorded the original video, had used her tech skills to develop an app that helped people document and report discrimination in public spaces. It had already been downloaded millions of times. James Thompson, the retired civil rights attorney who had stood up for Maya, had come out of retirement to work with airlines on developing anti-discrimination policies. His expertise was now in high demand across various industries. The man who had tried to steal Maya's seat had undergone a genuine transformation. After months of counseling and self-reflection, he had become an unexpected advocate for change, speaking at corporate events about his mistake and the importance of confronting one's own biases. Sarah and Jennifer, the flight attendants, were now senior trainers in the airline's new passenger relations program. Their handling of the situation had become a case study in professional crisis management. Maya's medical practice had grown, with many new patients saying they chose her after seeing how she handled herself that day. Young medical students, especially minorities, often cited her as an inspiration for pursuing their dreams despite potential obstacles. The airline's diversity initiative, sparked by the incident, had shown remarkable results. Discrimination complaints had dropped by 85%. Employee satisfaction had increased significantly. Their new training program was being adopted by other airlines. They had won several awards for corporate social responsibility. As Maya settled into her seat, a young black girl walking through first class stopped and stared at her with wide eyes. "Are you Dr. Wilson?" the girl asked shyly. "We learned about you in school. I want to be a doctor too." Maya smiled warmly, remembering how far things had come. "What kind of doctor do you want to be?" "A neurosurgeon, just like you." The girl beamed. The girl's mother, looking proud, added, "Your story showed her that she can achieve anything, no matter what obstacles she might face." During the flight, several passengers recognized Maya, but not with the awkward stares of before. Instead, there were respectful nods and genuine smiles of appreciation. The incident had sparked a broader conversation about everyday discrimination and the power of bystander intervention. Schools were teaching students about the importance of speaking up when witnessing injustice. Companies were revamping their training programs to include real-world scenarios. Patricia, the businesswoman who had supported Maya that day, had started a foundation providing scholarships to minority medical students. The first class of Wilson Scholars would be starting medical school that fall. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Maya opened her laptop to review her keynote speech. The title slide read, "Beyond the Seat: How One Moment of Courage Can Change the World." Her phone buzzed with a message from Grace. "1 year ago today, a video just hit 50 million views. You're still inspiring people, Dr. Wilson." The flight attendant serving first class was a recent graduate of the airline's new training program. "Dr. Wilson," she said proudly, "we studied your case during our first week of training. You helped change everything." Looking out the window at the clouds below, Maya reflected on how a single moment of standing up for herself had created ripples of change that continued to spread. What could have been just another story of discrimination had instead become a powerful lesson in courage, solidarity, and the possibility of real change. The incident on Flight 2317 had shown that when people stand together against injustice, lasting transformation is possible. It wasn't just about a seat in first class anymore. It was about creating a world where everyone could travel, work, and live with dignity and respect. As the plane flew west toward Los Angeles, Maya smiled, knowing that somewhere, another person facing discrimination might remember her story and find the courage to stand their ground, supported by others who refused to stay silent in the face of injustice.